Good morning, Broncos fans, and welcome to another Legends of Mile High. And news just broke. We just saw it come out from Mike Kliss and Tom Pelissero about promising young defensive backs coach Christian Parker is interviewing for a defensive coordinator job. So we're going to get into that today. We're going to talk about some of the Broncos' options and what this means for Broncos going forward. What are they going to do? Are they going to try and keep him? Are they going to make some moves? Let's chat about that as we get into it this morning. So again, welcome and thank you for joining today. I am going to make sure I've got Facebook up here and see who's in the chat here in just a moment. All right. We've got David Yunkin in here this morning. David, good morning. Thank you for being here. David says, morning, Thomas and Broncos country. It's good to see you, David. Thank you for being here this morning. I hope you have some thoughts on this new breaking news that just came out this morning about Christian Parker. Now, let's talk a little bit about Christian Parker before we jump into what we could potentially see happen. Obviously, one of those things that can happen is he could become the defensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. They're interviewing him. I don't know what time or when, but it has been confirmed that he is interviewing for a defensive coordinator position. Now, he's a promising young coach, man. He started out at Virginia State and spent some time in the college football, different college football programs, and then he went to the Green Bay Packers and coached for them for a while as a defensive quality assistant. And he came over with Nathaniel Hackett in 2021, or actually, sorry about that. He came over in 2021 before Nathaniel Hackett and as the defensive backs coach for the Denver Broncos, and stayed through the Hackett era and again through the Sean Payton hire. So they obviously really like this young coach, a young up and coming coach. He went through the accelerator program for the NFL, the coaching accelerator program. So he's very well liked in the organization and across the NFL for the most part. So he shows a lot of promise, like I said. So losing him would be a pretty good blow to the coaching staff. Obviously, they can look to replace him as with another defensive backs coach, but losing someone like that is still going to impact the team. And I think that the Broncos should make some maybe try and keep him around with doing some other things. Richard is coming in saying, good morning, Thomas and Broncos country. Good morning, Richard. Nice to see you in here this morning. Thank you for being here. So, yeah. So what can the Broncos do? Well, number one, they can't really block him from interviewing with the Patriots. One, it would be just a not a very nice move, so to speak, to block someone who's this would be a promotion. So you can't really block an assistant coach from going in and trying to get a promotion. This would be a defensive coordinator position with the New England Patriots. And New England Patriots just, mutually parted ways with their longtime legendary coach, Bill Belichick. And young Jared Mayo is now I think the youngest coach in the NFL to head up that program. And he's looking to find some promising young coaches to come in and fill out his staff. And Christian Parker, sorry, not the failed quarterback, Christian Parker from the Denver Broncos is a leading candidate for that role. Now, what can the Broncos do? Well, the Broncos can't block him really, but they could promote him. Now, they would have to probably promote him in order to stop this from happening. If the Patriots really do want to hire him after the interview, they would have to promote him to defensive coordinator, most likely, in order to keep him around the team or some other position of equivalent value. Well, that would mean that the Broncos would have to get rid of Vance Joseph, the current defensive coordinator. Now, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not that would be a smart move. Vance Joseph struggled. There's no doubt about it. He's never had a great season as a defensive coordinator in my mind. in a lot of other people's minds, but he's very well thought of. Obviously, got a head coaching position with the Denver Broncos, and Sean Payton brought him in as defensive coordinator. But he had his struggles for sure. So maybe that would be an option. Maybe Sean Payton's got to come back to the team from his vacation and really seriously think about, do I want to lose a promising young coach to another team when I'm most likely going to be making a change at defensive coordinator anyway? Maybe not this year, but possibly the following year. If Vance Joseph doesn't have what it takes in 2024 to really make this defense better than what we saw. So that's a big decision that Sean Payton needs to make if he wants to keep this young coach around. Now, David Youngkin's coming back in saying, I'm still wondering if they should move on from Vance Joseph because the defense can't be dominant one week and slacking off the next week. Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. That's a decision that Sean Payton's going to have to make, and I get it. He doesn't want to make it right now. He wanted to take a break, kind of clear his mind or whatever he was doing before coming back and really making decisions about this coaching roster, this coaching staff and position, roster positions. But the season has concluded. We're already almost onto the second week of the playoffs. So it's time to get back to work for Sean Payton. It really is. And it's time to make some tough decisions. It's easy to just carry on the way they carried on, from last year, but that's not going to be good enough for this team to move forward, right? They've got to make some tough decisions, and some of those have to do with the coaching staff. And Vance Joseph's name should be at the top of that list. There's no doubt. Like David said here, he definitely was inconsistent with that defense. He's respected. Don't get me wrong. He's respected as a good teacher, but he leaves a little bit to be lacking from my perspective in the game day play calling situations and setting his players up to succeed and having them in the right position. So that's something that has to be talked about. I mean, the Broncos, first of all, when you lose 70-20, that has to weigh in to some of these decisions, right? That's a historic loss, and that's a historic defensive meltdown. So I think that should come into play. You should also think about what the defense did for that 6-game stretch where they played pretty well. But in the end, the Broncos were, if you look at most of the metrics other than turnovers, they were towards the bottom of the league this year. And that's not good enough. That's just not good enough, especially when you have, some players on that side of the ball, Pat Surtain, Justin Simmons, all pro type players. You just didn't get it done. And some of that has to do with talent for sure, right? I mean, I think their defensive line really struggled. I think their linebackers also struggled as well in coverage and things like that. And they did struggle with missed tackles much early in the season. So there's a lot of reasons to really contemplate whether or not Vance Joseph should be here. And now this is a second reason coming in, right? Or another reason. Do they really want to lose a promising young coach who could be a really future, part of this team, up and comer? And you saw what happened with Evero last year, right? He didn't want to be here a lot, and they went from a pretty solid defensive performance for most of the season, to being at the bottom of the league by making that change. So I think it's something that the Broncos and Sean Payton, for that matter, really has to take the time to contemplate about losing this coach. I think it would be a big loss. I really like the way Christian Parker has coached and has handled himself. He seems like he's a future, maybe even a head coach in this league, depending on how he does, when he gets promoted to defensive coordinator. But obviously, we have to see if the New England Patriots are going to make that offer to him and going to bring him in. That's going to change. That's going to make the decision a little bit tougher, depending on whether or not they do that. So, and David's coming back in with another comment asking or saying something about Russell Wilson here. So David says some people are saying that Russ is coming back. I say the marriage is over. Well, that's the big question, right? I mean, we're talking about Christian Parker here, but obviously Russell Wilson, anything that happens to him is going to be the biggest news, right? And I think you're right. I agree. I don't think there's any way to really uh, have Sean Payton and Russell Wilson coexist on the same team. It didn't work. For we can say whatever reasons, it's Sean Payton, it was Russell Wilson, the offense, whatever it was, it doesn't matter. But they're not a fit together. That's all there is to it. So Russ coming back, I have my I highly doubt it. I think it's over too, David. I don't think he's coming back. I think he's gone. I think he's going to go play for another team, and the Broncos are going to have to eat the cap hit, which is going to cause a lot more issues on this team. And I think that particular decision, the decision for that contract and the decision that he's not going to be the person that saves this team, so to speak, it has some ramifications, big ones for 2024. And that's why I think they might take a step back. You saw 8 wins, a little bit of an improvement. I think you might see a step back unless something significant happens. They're in a salary cap situation that's not favorable, and they have a low amount of draft picks, really. I mean, so there's going to be it's going to be a tough offseason, I think, for the Broncos. And Gary Fires coming in saying, "Go Broncos." Good morning, Gary. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And Joey LaGuardia is here as well, saying, "What do we need to stop Mahomes?" Should be the question. Well, I mean, that is a big question, right? They did stop him. I mean, they finally broke that winning streak, but the big question is how can they climb to the top again of the AFC West? Obviously, the Chiefs have ruled the AFC West for several years, and so that they do have to figure out a way to stop that team. And it really does start with winning in the division. And the Broncos, swept the Chargers, but got swept by the Raiders. And you can't have that. They have to at least split with the Raiders and sweep at least one of the AFC West teams to really claim that title. And they didn't do it. And I think that starts with being able to have an offense that can at least match their output, and a defense that knows how to stop them. And they played really well in that game. The defense played really well. They took it to them, and so maybe they can build on that. But losing Christian Parker may not be something that helps in that endeavor to beat and stop Patrick Mahomes. And I will say this too, though. I think Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs team took a significant step back this season. I know they're in the playoffs, but they didn't look like the Chiefs of old. So, that has to play into it as well. Did the Broncos happen to, meet up with the Chiefs at the right time and get that win? And that team really isn't good enough to consistently beat the Chiefs and climb to the top of the AFC West. Those are big questions that need to be asked. And frankly, is Vance Joseph the defensive coordinator that can consistently shut him down? So thank you, Joey, for being here. Appreciate it. And we got trigger warning coming in here saying Bronco Nation. Well, I know it'd be argue it should be Broncos country, but Broncos Nation used to be the term a long time ago, and it kind of switched. It doesn't matter. It says needs swagger at QB, not a corpse. Yeah, they need swagger across this team altogether. I appreciate you coming in here and talking about that, but they need swagger across this whole team. I don't think it's good enough. I don't think the leadership, the mentality, the winning mentality, and doing what it takes to be a winner is permeating through this whole team. And it's funny because I was going to talk about until this news broke, I was going to talk about something else today, and I'll talk about it probably next week. But what has happened in history to really create a spark and get something going for these teams when they've been, for this Broncos organization, when it's been down before. And they need something. They need something. And you're right. It really does start at quarterback, and they need to draft one. I think I don't. And Trigger Warning's coming back in here saying like Mayfield, but probably not available if you draft possibilities. Yeah, exactly. I don't think they can afford Baker Mayfield. I don't think they can afford any QB that's going to really turn their fortunes around right now. So I think it has to be a young draft pick And that's the big question. Where are they going to find that? Are they going to find that draft pick, in the first round of the draft? Are they going to have to wait till next year? There's a lot of questions around that. Quentin Caldwell coming in. Thank you so much for the super chat support. I really do appreciate that, Quentin. And I appreciate you being here this morning. It's a bright and early, but breaking news came out about Christian Parker. So thank you for being here. And Quentin says, good morning, everyone. Looking forward to the draft. Yeah, I mean, I always look forward to the draft, but it sucks that we're already looking forward to the draft. We were looking forward to the draft, early. You seem like early in the season, and then as they were kind of winding down, knowing they weren't getting to the playoffs, we're back interested in the draft, and that stinks. I was kind of hoping that this would be the year they turn their fortunes around and make the playoffs, and we wouldn't have to worry about the draft right now. But yeah, they're going to have to. The Broncos are going to have to really kill this draft. I mean, they are going to have to hit on a higher percentage of players than what is the norm, because they're losing several starters to free agency, unrestricted free agents. Several starters are going to be gone. They're probably going to have to move a couple starters as well at different positions, in order to get under the salary cap. So if they can't hit this draft right, it's going to be a rough couple years trying to get back to those winning ways, Quentin. And so yeah, I mean, there's a lot riding on this draft, which is why looking forward to it is more than just seeing what they can get, because this is an important draft. But thank you so much for coming in, Quentin. I appreciate it again. And we got Joey LaGuardia coming back in saying, yes, Chiefs have digressed some. I'd bite the bullet and trade Surtain for a king's ransom. We need too many pieces, and it will take many years if we don't get those pieces. Yeah, I mean, that's been kicked around, Joey, trading Patrick Surtain. The reason why I don't like that is because getting draft picks doesn't always mean they're going to get a player or two or even a quarterback that pans out. So you have a premium player at a premium position that is good. He's an all-pro. Getting rid of him for draft picks, what if those draft picks don't pan out? Then it's a waste, just kind of like trading, what they traded for Russell Wilson didn't work out. But the draft is even more of a risk, so to speak, because you don't know if these draft picks are going to pan out. But like you said, he's the only one that's going to get them something, right? Something of tremendous value. So I can understand the reason behind it, why that people have talked about getting rid of him, because it's it's the one big piece. So we'll see. They definitely have to get this figured out, though, and hit on these draft picks. And I think they will make some trades. I think they'll get a couple more draft picks, so they're not going to be just sitting on 6. And maybe they end up trading back and getting some more. I'm not sure. Sean Payton isn't really a trade back type of guy. He goes and gets what he wants. If he has to trade up, he does. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, Joey. But thank you for being here this morning. Eric Smith's coming in saying, missed last night's show, so not sure if this was talked about. Thoughts, implications on Davis Webb coaching in the Shrine game? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they must have talked about it last night on the show, but I think it's great. I mean, you're going to have somebody there on the ground, seeing firsthand, coaching, seeing how these players react to coaching. I think it's huge, especially when it's a quarterback coach, right? Because the Broncos need to get themselves a quarterback, Eric, and being there, firsthand knowledge, coaching, understanding how they take coaching, what, they're kind of, it's different when you're coaching than when you're sitting back watching things unfold on the field, because they, like I said, firsthand knowledge. So I think it's huge. I really do, especially being the quarterback's coach. So I look forward to seeing, what they learn and who they draft because of it. So thank you, Eric, for being here. Appreciate it. Keith Brugman, how are you doing this morning? Thank you for coming in here, Keith, and joining Legends of Mile High. Keith says, Christian Parker being interviewed by the Patriots speaks to how good of a coach he is. Not many coaches get opportunities after an 8-9 season. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Like, you don't see this happen a lot, right? Where a team that has obviously struggled for several years, and he was a coach for 3 years here, so he's been part of that. To get this type of opportunity is big. But he's very well respected within the organization and across the NFL. So he's a hot candidate, and he's going to be gone soon. If he's not gone this year, he's probably going to get another opportunity the following year, and so on. So the Broncos, like I said early, have a decision to make on Christian Parker. Do they want to just let him go and let him go help another team win, or are they going to make a decision with their current defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph, and maybe get Christian Parker to stick around? That's a good question. But yeah, Keith, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And we got Roy Osborne coming in there saying, "Hey there, Thomas. If we choose a quarterback at 12, I don't think there will be a starter day one, but rather development one. Then we are in the same boat. I think, yeah, if we don't, if the Broncos don't take a quarterback at 12, they're going to have to get a later, developmental one. And the Broncos are going to be in the same boat no matter what, really, unless they somehow get a quarterback at 12 that can be like a CJ Stroud or something close to it. They're going to be struggling next year regardless. One, you're going to have a young rookie quarterback if you take that person at 12 and put him into the starter. There's going to be some struggles, no doubt. And they're going to have to pair him with some sort of veteran. And Stidham is probably not that guy from my perspective. I don't think he's a very very good quarterback. So maybe they're going to bring in a different veteran. So the problem is they have holes across the team. One player quarterback isn't going to fix the team, even if they're really good as a rookie. I don't think they can fix it because they're losing, I think, 7 starters, maybe 6, if I remember correctly, to unrestricted free agency. And then, like I said, they have to make some sort of moves with some of these starters in order to get under the cap. It can't all be restructures, right? It can't all be restructured. It can't all push this money down the road to a different time. So they're going to have to maybe trade or release some starters. So there's a potential there could be 9 or 10 starters missing from this team. Now, some people would say that's okay because they weren't very good. They didn't make the playoffs. They had another losing season. Maybe that's what they need to do. But replacing those players with somebody better is going to be difficult. That's why I said that the draft is important. They're going to have to rely on some of these young players. I mean, so Drew Sanders is going to have to make a big leap. JL Skinner probably is going to have to make a pretty sizable leap. Who are you going to put in at defensive tackle when you lose DJ Jones? Probably, and Mike Purcell probably. Who's going to step in? Henningsen, we've seen him. Jonathan Harris, we've seen him. Is that an upgrade? Probably not. So they're going to have to find another one, but they're not going to be able to spend a lot of money in the in free agency in order to do that. So they got to hit on somebody in the draft. And with 6 draft picks, that's going to be tough. So choosing a quarterback at 12 would be a luxury, I guess, but it's not going to fix the team. So, Roy, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And we've got Keith coming back in saying, Thomas, the Broncos package the number 12 and Jerry Jeudy and move up at the draft to ? Basically. Well, they're not going to be able to move up very far. Jerry Jeudy does not command that much of a return. So say you could get a second rounder. Maybe you could move up a few spots. Not very, you couldn't get close enough to get the top 2 quarterbacks for sure. So you would have to package something else, something like a future draft pick as well to kind of move up even farther. Moving up into the top 10, you could probably do that and get maybe into the top 10, but it would be late around top 10. So Jerry Jeudy doesn't move the needle that much. Now a future first, or maybe Jerry Jeudy and the 12 and a future second could get you up there farther, and that's the problem. And you hit the nail on the head, though. There's so many QB needy teams in front of the Broncos. If they really want to go out and get a quarterback, they may have to trade up. So it's an interesting question. My personal opinion, unless they think that there's just not a good quarterback coming out next year in the draft, then maybe you should look at some other key positions to really solidify this youth movement that they're going to have to do. And one of those would probably be offensive tackle. You need a left tackle because Garrett Bowles is probably one of your trade pieces that we talked about that could fetch something. And he's got a $20 million cap hit coming up. So that moving that off the books would definitely help put that salary cap into a more manageable position. So, I know I think they're going to trade Jerry Jeudy either way, Keith. But I don't know if he moves the needle enough to package up that deal to move too far up. And David's kind of agreeing with me here, saying JJ has not shown any signs of improvement to be a second round pick. Yeah, I mean, he has definitely not lived up to his draft pick potential. And he just, for me, just doesn't seem like he has what it takes to really be that number one receiver. So if you're not going to be that number one receiver, you're going to be a complementary type player. People aren't going to give you, other teams aren't going to give you a whole lot for him unless they loved him coming out of college and they think that they can make him something that we haven't seen from him. So, and Quentin's come back in with another super chat. Thank you so much, Quentin. Appreciate it. As always, he says, if we do lose so many starters, then would you say we should trade down to get more picks? Yeah, absolutely. I think if there isn't somebody there that is a key position, right? Like if there's not a quarterback that you like, an offensive tackle, left tackle that you like, or someone that moves the needle, like from a pass rushing perspective from the interior defensive line, or say an edge rusher there. If some of those aren't like really a kind of a game changer for that position, that's going to really put you over the top, then you should definitely consider trading back and getting more picks. But I think they're going to get more picks because they're going to get rid of a few players who are impacting the salary cap and will fetch something. Maybe not a first rounder, but I think those potential trade candidates are Garrett Bowles, Jerry Jeudy, and even Justin Simmons. Now, I don't think none of those players are going to get you a first rounder, but it's going to get you. I mean, they could get you second and third rounders, probably, maybe a fourth rounder in there. So you could get a couple picks by trading a couple of those guys. So maybe they don't have to trade back, but like I said, if there's someone, if everybody's gone that you really liked, why not trade back? The difference between 12, that area and down into the late teens or early 20s isn't a huge difference, especially if your guy isn't there that you wanted. So Quentin, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And then David's coming back in. Thomas, who do you like more, offensive or defensive players? I'm assuming you're talking about the draft, but I'm a defensive guy, so I love defensive players. But what I'm for the draft for the first round, you got to take somebody at a position that's impactful. So quarterback, left tackle, interior pass rush guy, edge rusher. Those are the areas that you should be looking at, I think, in the first round. Something that moves. That's why I don't like the talk about trading away Patrick Surtain, because that's a position of importance, cornerback, and he's the best in the NFL, or arguably the best in the NFL. So I think that they need to attack those positions. I don't think you should be taking a guard, or I don't think you should be taking an inside linebacker or even a safety that high, because I know that they're important pieces in a team, but when you're like the Broncos and you need an impact player at important positions, you shouldn't be drafting one of those positions. But I'm a defensive guy. I always have been, played defense when I was playing football, and I love it. I hate that it's the game has changed and taking away a lot of what I loved about defense, but that's the name of the game. That's what's happening. So, and Joey LaGuardia is saying we should have had that fire sale, and I'm assuming you mean at the draft deadline. Absolutely, they I think they felt like they could turn it around, and they kind of did, right? But then they faltered towards the end. There's never usually a huge fire sale of the draft. I mean, I looked at a lot of the history going back a few years. A lot of teams don't get rid of a ton of players. You have to have people willing to give you something. So it makes it hard, but I think they should have tried to tried harder to get rid of Jerry Jeudy at that point because he even with a quarterback change, he really didn't do much. And I'll be honest, he's just not an impactful player, not especially for where his draft pedigree should be. So uh, it's it's an interesting thing to look back, and they should have done something. They should have got something, but I think they'll get more for Jerry Jeudy now than they did at the draft trade deadline. Because, or I'm sorry, the trade deadline. They'll get more before the draft because, especially if teams start to see wide receivers going off the board early, it might up his value a little bit. It could backfire, but we'll see. Roy Osborne says, since Sean Payton is in charge, I don't see trading down. He usually trades up, and then we be in more trouble. Yeah, he's more aggressive. That's the thing about him and George Payton. They kind of have a conflicting philosophy when it comes to the draft. George Payton, he values draft picks a lot more than I think Sean Payton. I mean, Sean Payton values draft picks, but he's more aggressive in going up. I think Sean Payton, the one knock that I have about his draft philosophy is he values draft picks more than he should. I think he thinks that, the more draft picks you have is better. And that leads him to trading away players that he probably shouldn't to get those draft picks. And that's the knock that I have with George Payton. Sean Payton's a little too aggressive in my mind. I think he squanders value to go out and get the person he likes. But if he does, he better hit on that player when you trade up. And they traded up and they got Marvin Mims. And he looks like it could be a pretty good player. So that is a conflicting philosophy, but maybe that conflicting philosophy will help them be better at the draft. Hopefully it's not so conflicting that it makes the draft a hard proposition. And Colin Wood is coming in. Thanks for being here, Colin. We might as well trade or cut our expensive players and start over with draftees and free agents. Well, they're going to have to, Colin. They Russell Wilson's dead cap hit, which is going to happen. I don't see him coming around. They're going to spread that over 2 years, but that still puts them very, very much over the cap, and they're going to have to make some moves in order to get under that cap. They can't restructure everybody. It's just not going to happen. They're going to have to get rid of some players, and some of those players are going to be starters, people that have been here a while, and starters. Jerry Jeudy, like I said, Garrett Bowles, Justin Simmons, Cortland Sutton, maybe. There's some players that are going to be moved. They have to be, and they're not going to have a lot of money to bring in free agents to really change or move that needle for the Broncos towards the winning ways. They can go out and get some cheaper vet free agents that need that can fill some holes, but they have to get younger. They have to go to the draft. They have to have these young players that they have drafted step up large. Those young players have to step up in a big way in order to turn this team around, because they're not going to be able to go spend the money like they did last year. So it's going to happen. It's a necessity. So thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And we got Joey's coming in. I bet you would trade for a Tom Nalen. Yeah, my thoughts on Tom Nalen. Tom Nalen for the Hall of Fame. I'm still pushing that. So, if you see anything coming out from me from social media about Tom Nalen, I'd appreciate a retweet and whatnot to see if we can get some more momentum from him. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, a center is a key position, and that's a position that they finally seem like they had a player who could play in Cushenberry. Finally came around, was a good player last year, but now he looks like he's going to be gone, right? He looks like he's going to probably be priced out of the Broncos market. He's going to go to a team that can spend the money, who need a center, and they're going to be relying on a couple young players, Wattenberg or Forsyth, to come in and solidify that center position again. So having a good center is a lot more important than people think. And Quentin says, I still don't see what others saw in Russ to make that type of deal. Pat is the only QB I do that contract with. Yeah, it was a big contract. I don't understand why I understand why they traded for him. And maybe the contract was part of that deal. Maybe he wasn't coming otherwise. But you have to consider that he was he was a winning quarterback. He people were excited about it. So I can see that the contract is the biggest issue. And that's a huge contract that to give somebody that they didn't have to give it to unless, like I said, that was not that was part of the deal. Like I'll waive my trade clause to come here, but I want a new contract and it's got to be this, and maybe that's what happened. And the Broncos were desperate to turn their fortunes around, and it's worked before. To teams that have went out and got a quarterback and they turned their fortunes around. So they were really trying to turn their fortunes around with Russell Wilson, and unfortunately, it didn't work out. But now they're going to live with the consequences. And Keith Brugman says, might be a tough year next year, but who is your too early player that steps up and makes the biggest improvement next year? I think it has to be Drew Sanders because he's going to have to step up. I mean, I don't think the Broncos are going to be able to go out and bring in a inside linebacker. I don't think they should draft an inside linebacker unless it's towards the later rounds. I think they need Drew Sanders to step up, and I think he will. I think he made some improvements. I know I worry that moving him to edge and trying to trying to get him some playing time in there. I hope it didn't stunt his growth, but I think it has to be Drew Sanders. I think he's going to take a big step on the defensive side. On the offensive side, it's got to be Marvin Mims. Yeah, he's going to have to make a big leap as well. I think both of those two can and should. So I haven't seen much from you didn't get to see Jail Skinner much. You didn't get to see a whole lot. I don't know who's going to come out in the center position between Wattenberg and Forsyth, but I think it's Drew Sanders. That's who I'm going to say steps up big next year. All right. Let's see if we got any more comments here to see what's going on in there. And seeing a few talking about centers and who is the greatest of all time. There's a big argument for that, but I'll tell you, there's a good argument for Tom Nalen to be there in some of those top center arguments. So it's interesting. And Gary Fire's coming in with Riley Moss to answer that question. Riley Moss is a good choice because he's going to have to step up too. There's a lot of young players that are going to have to step up in order to really fill out this roster. Riley Moss, is injured and took a while to get on the field. He seems like he has the right attitude. And a lot of people, had higher grades on him. So when coming out of into the draft. So it is very possible that he could be that guy. And they need him to, because obviously Damari Mathis took a huge step backwards, lost his starting role. Fabian Moreau was good for a short period of time, and then he became a liability. So Riley Moss is another one. There's going to be several young players that have to step up. So we've got Joey LaGuardia coming back in saying that Peyton Manning seems to think we make the Broncos next year. I'm not sure who he thinks will be the QB next year. Well, yeah, that's the $1 million question. Who is going to be the QB? I don't know why Peyton Manning thinks that. I'm looking at this team thinking they're going to take a step back. I don't know where the optimism comes from, but Peyton Manning, he knows more about football than I do. That's for sure. Maybe he sees something different that I don't see that gives him hope. I just don't think I think they're going to struggle to get another 8 wins next year. I just do. It's just, unless this young team comes together and they hit on some draft picks and, Stidham or whoever they bring in, is that just good enough to get them, another win or two. They'd probably have to get 2 more wins above what they did this season in order to get to the playoffs. And Keith's saying, funny how we say we need to draft and develop, but yet we're letting Cushingberry walk. Center can be such a tough position. Yeah, it's one of those things that you have to do. You have to develop your young guys and let them fill out the roster. But the problem is they probably don't have the money to pay him. And that's the thing. That's what this Russell Wilson contract, it has a ripple effect across the entire roster. And one of those may be at center. So I don't know what Cushionberry is going to demand in the market. I don't know. They're probably going to let him test it, but you're right. It stinks to see these young guys that they've developed who finally came into their own, right? Finally became a good player at their position, which Cushenberry did, and you're going to see him go to another team. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but they've got a salary cap problem, and it's going to be a problem this year. Hopefully not next year. Hopefully they can absorb that second piece of that hit well, and then be back to normal free agency after that. But this Russell Wilson contract has put them in a lot of bind, which is why it was interesting that Sean Payton didn't hold George Payton accountable for that. But it looks like he's gonna stick around and they're gonna continue to work together. So hopefully that sort of contract isn't in the Broncos' future down the road that really puts them in the hole again. Joey LaGuardia saying trade Bowles to save money, to save some money to keep him. Yeah, they're probably going to try and trade Bowles. I said that early on, and I'm going to stick with that. They're probably going to need to move him in order to get some salary cap relief. But I don't think that single move is enough to keep Cushenberry, because like I said, I think they're going to be $60 million over the cap, or roughly that, pretty close to that. So they're going to have to make some moves in order to alleviate that, and they're going to have to go with young players. So I think they're probably going to go with their 7th rounder, Alex Forsyth, at center next year, because they're not going to be able to afford Cushenberry. All right, folks, thank you so much for being here this morning. Thank you for talking with me again. Christian Parker, promising young coach, is interviewing for the defensive coordinator position in New England, and that was confirmed by Mike Kliss and others this morning. So look to see what happens. Look to see what Sean Payton does if he wants to keep him around. So we'll have to watch the news to see what events unfold if the Patriots are serious about taking Christian Parker as their defensive coordinator. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for supporting the show and the chat, and I hope that everybody is getting themselves prepared for what is to come for this Denver Broncos team. Keith Brugman says, thank you, Thomas. Always makes Friday mornings great. Yeah, thank you so much. And Joey, thank you for saying it's a good show. Have a good day. Yeah, thank you so much. Again, if you, there's other shows that are great. Go ahead and check them out. Orange and Blue View on Saturday, which used to be my shows, now Dylan Von Arks and Ron White. Check that out. Check out myself and Luke Patterson on Mile High Insiders on Wednesdays. There's some stories that are out there. I'm sure there's going to be a story about Christian Parker coming out this morning on milehighhuddle.com. So thank you very much. Have a great day, and we will see you next Friday.